Hello students, we've already gone through 18th and 19th century and now we'll come to the fag end of the 19th century. We talk about Art Nouveau and related developments. End of the 19th century became very exciting because a lot of changes had already taken place, industrial revolution had already come, new materials and new technologies had erupted at breakneck pace in every sphere of life and in architecture, and new types of buildings had also come up. End 19th century then in architecture got defined by two movements, two very important movements. One was the Art Nouveau in Europe and the other was the Chicago School in America. Art Nouveau began in Europe and spread globally. Chicago School, which had a very deep impact, a great impact because it gave rise to the tall building or the tall office building specifically. Now, these are the buildings of Art Nouveau, highly ornamental, profused with ornamentation within and without. The one big difference is if the ornamentation of Baroque post-Renaissance period, the Baroque movement that had come up, that ornamentation was inspired by religion. This ornamentation was primarily inspired by nature, and we'll look at more of those examples. Now, in the Crystal Palace exhibition, the great exhibition of 1851, one thing came out very clearly. The products being manufactured in the factories had poor craftsmanship and excessive ornamentation. The reason was that these products had now become available to the middle classes, to the masses, and they had a lot of aspiration. There were more things available than in previous centuries and more people could now have them, says Nicholas Trimpton. This was the era or the beginning of the consumer culture, so prominent in our modern society. Because of this, these mass products that were these products which were mass produced in factories, they also led to saving of time, saving of expenses and saving of labor. Home became the site of technological progress with domestic labor saving appliances like washing machines, irons for ironing clothes, etc. These are some examples. This is an example of an early washing machine. And because these labor saving devices were available at home, it saved time, saved labor. More women were now able to join the workforce because the work at home could be done faster, quicker, with lesser labor. But the one thing that I also mentioned the last time, the disappearance or the extinction of the medieval craftsmen, because home guilds were not there, the products were not being manufactured in such a large scale at home, and the factory made goods became more prominent. The medieval craftsmen started disappearing and the appearance of the product was left in the hands of the uneducated manufacturer who did not have much design understanding or experience generally. Thousands of cheap articles to be consumed by the middle classes could be made in the same time and cost that required earlier could be made by hand, only one object versus thousands of these cheap articles. There was breathless space, no time left to refine the product, there was no quality control that led to poor quality products. The reason why they were still being sold was because those handmade products were very expensive earlier and they could only be afforded by the very rich. Now these mass produced goods could be afforded, was the aspiration of the middle classes. They wanted it, they could afford it, but the quality was much less. Even then they were being bought because the aspiration was there to possess the kind of products the rich used to have. Now, is it really true that craftsmanship and machine made products, there is this vast difference in quality? Not anymore. In the modern times, custom made products have their market, factory made products have their market. Let us take the example of two top line cars, the Rolls-Royce and the Mercedes, particularly the Mercedes Maybach. Now, these two cars, if you compare the prices, a Rolls-Royce of the similar price, of a similar kind of vehicle would cost us around 10 crores and a Mercedes Maybach, a factory made car, would cost around 3 crores. We all know that Mercedes is a custom made car. It is rather made to order with lot of customizations and the prices can also shoot up way beyond 10 crores. The Maybach on the other hand being made in a factory is an equally efficient car, very finely done. If this is the interior of the Rolls-Royce, highly luxurious, the Maybach interior is also very luxurious. Both have their aesthetic quality, both have their tremendous finish, and both have their market. Let us come down to more regular products. Let us take a handcrafted shirt versus a factory made shirt. This is a handcrafted shirt, and this shirt would cost you anything up to or even more than 11,000 rupees, whereas this shirt is about 4,000 rupees. This handmade crockery, which is about 10,000 rupees, versus this factory made crockery, which is around 2,000 rupees. But they both have quality and finish. Handmade products have their market, which is very upscale, a very niche market, and very few people have access to this, but that does not mean that the factory made products are very poor quality today. What we have seen here in 1851 is not the scenario today. Today factory made products are very, very finely finished. Today if you go to buy a cell phone, for example, which is a low price cell phone, a smartphone about 6 to 7,000 rupees, will work very efficiently, do all the needed tasks, do all the jobs you wanted to do, which a 1.5 lakh Apple or a Samsung device would do. There is a market in the factory made product of both kind of people on the lower economic segment and the very high economic segment, and all the way in between. Not just cell phones, even cars, for example, a car which is sold for about 4 to 5 lakh rupees in India and a car sold for a couple of crores. A car at 4 to 5 lakh doesn't break down, it doesn't have poor quality finishing, or the doors are jamming, or the lines are crooked. No, they are finely factory made, finished quality products which will take you to point A to point B very efficiently. Therefore, if we find out, if we see these products, is there a difference in aesthetic quality? Of course, there is a difference in the sense a handmade product, there is more detailed ornamentation, more detailed handwork. You can compare, for example, a handmade carpet with a factory made carpet, or a handmade crockery set with a factory made crockery set. A factory made product, on the other hand, is a more simple design. It has got a more precise finish and a simpler aesthetic. Again, I will repeat, today both markets exist. Handmade products are for a niche bracket. These factory made products are for a wider spectrum of people, but the factory made products today are not poorly finished. They are also well finished products. If you just compare similar building elements like a fireplace, for example, a TV console, for example, or a cabinet, with what appeared in the 19th century, we find that the factory made products of the 19th century were very, very heavily ornamented. The ornamentation itself was not very well controlled, and they were not that fine finished. We see factory made products today, they are very sleek lines, they are very simple, modern. Of course, ornamentation has in a sense already disappeared, not kind of profuse ornamentation is not there, but the quality, aesthetic quality, the product quality has vastly improved. Therefore, to say that poor quality happened because of industrial growth and the invention of machines is a very superficial answer, because if we come to that, even a potter's wheel of the ancient times is a machine. So is also a handloom or a printer's press. So machines per se by themselves did not lead to poor quality products. It was the lack of quality control, the lack of design understanding on the part of the manufacturer that led to the poor quality. Now we know that progress is essential. If we go in handloom industry, in the textile industry, the machines that we have today are a very necessary step of evolution. There is a logical evolution, for example, in an olden calculator and a modern day calculator. From simple mechanical devices to the modern machines of today, progress, evolution will always happen. If we look at just the mobile phones, how they have evolved in just the past 15 to 20 years, the growth has been tremendous. Or in cars, for example, if you look at the automobiles that came out in the beginning of the 20th century and what we have today, there is a vast progress. So this kind of progress, this kind of evolution is necessary in mechanization and in industrialization. Now, this kind of development we also see in architecture. We see that materials, changing function, building technology, and the changing understanding of aesthetics has led to change in buildings also. If we have this in the Art Nouveau, this in the end of the Art Nouveau, this is the early modern times. Then we have the Pompidou, the deconstructivist architecture of architects like Frank Gehry, or the tremendously sculptural expressionist architecture of Santiago Calatrava. We see the same kind of progress and evolution happening in skyscrapers, in tall buildings, from the early stages of Chicago School, New York, the Seagram building in the 1950s, the Sears Tower, now called the Willis Tower, and then the tallest building in the world today, the Burj Khalifa. Materials, function, building technology, changing aesthetics has led to this evolution take place. So whether it is cars, whether it is phones, whether it is any kind of product and buildings, this kind of progress and evolution is essential. Machines are not the problem. In fact, machines are the solution to the kind of buildings we need today. But in the early beginnings that happened, just with all this change happening, these products coming up, major shift happened in the 19th century, and there arose a movement called the arts and crafts movement. There was an attempt to reform this distorted kind of design aesthetic that had come up, and to reform this design and decoration in Britain. It was a reaction against the decline in these standards of machinery and factory production. The criticism became even sharper after the items were displayed in the Great Exhibition of 1851. And thus, one architect, William Morris, propounded the dictum fitness for purpose, which basically means a product or building is designed to be fit for its intended use or function. That means every single part or component, whether it's a furniture, whether it's a building, it ought to serve a particular use or function. It was a reaction against the excessive ornamentation and poor quality mass produced goods displayed in that exhibition and that were there in the 19th century. He was advocating quality, functionality and beauty in everyday products. So close to the Vitruvian idea of form, function and structure, forming that very interesting, very important triangle, how these three need to go together: the beauty of the product, the function of the product and the structure of the product. Now, why fitness for purpose? He realized that the decayed foundations of art during the Industrial Revolution, not one furnishing was available that he could provide for his own studio in London, and they were not fitting his purpose. Therefore, he built his own furniture, and this furniture was heavy and solid. As you see here, it was devoid of all unnecessary ornamentation, very simple, neat and tidy aesthetic of the furniture. He came up with other things also, not only furniture which was very beautiful and functional with minimal ornamentation. He came up with textiles and even wallpaper that was inspired by nature, durable and suitable. And even in books and printing, they were well made, easy to read with clear typography and high quality materials. He was providing quality, functionality and aesthetics, and he was trying to bring it in everyday products. Even in the examples of architecture, he brought in buildings that were in more harmony with nature, built for their intended purpose. They were functional, comfortable and aesthetically integrated with their environment. Thus, we have the very foundation of architectural concepts of the modern times. Now, this fitness for purpose, we can look at it in many products. When a product is designed to be fit for its intended use or function. Let's take the example of cars again. We have a sports car, and the very design of it clearly shows you it's meant for speed, it's not meant for your day-to-day run. Or a sedan, meant for comfortable rides, an SUV or a compact SUV for a family, or an off-road vehicle, a 4x4 for those who are more adventurous. Now, these are all meant for their intended use, whether it's a sports car, a sedan, an SUV or an off-roader, and they are all aesthetically pleasing, all fulfilling their function. They are also now factory made products which are made with such finesse, are avoiding waste of materials, resources and labor. They are efficient and they are sustainable. Now the same fitness for purpose happens in clothing. We wear a certain kind of clothes when we go to work and we want to make a good appearance in our workplace. We wear more traditional attire when we have a social function or a religious gathering, a marriage, etc. We wear casual clothes when we are out on a weekend, and we wear night clothes when we want to have very relaxed clothing to sleep. They are all fit for their purpose, for the office, for the social function, for the casual walk, for the night's rest. Now this was very clearly felt in all products. It was felt particularly in architecture, where whether we had a bank or a house or a shopping mall or a railway station, all of them showing from outside, there was a lot, they were having classical facades or eclectic facades. There was not a fitness for purpose. This we find more today when we have school buildings, houses, factories, a school of architecture like the Bauhaus, or a hotel building or a shopping mall, all have this fitness for their purpose. A shopping mall is vastly different from a house, for example, both intrinsically in function, which was also true in the 19th century, but externally also the representation, the aesthetic representation is very different. Now the fitness for purpose we find in the contemporary times, in the 20th and the 21st century, in our tall buildings, in office buildings, railway stations, factory buildings, museums, art galleries. And we find fitness for purpose with buildings not only designed for their intended use, but also being safe, being durable, energy efficient, sustainable, particularly with respect to their environmental impact, whether it is this building, the Law Court in Antwerp by Richard Rogers, the Commerce Bank in Germany, Frankfurt by Norman Foster, or the Center for Applied Sciences in San Francisco by Renzo Piano. Thus, the whole concept of sustainable development with all its goals has now become a vital part of building design today. Now, returning back to the arts and crafts movement, because they came up with this, that the machines were responsible for the poor quality products, they returned back to handcrafted, artisan made goods, heavily influenced by nature, and that included furniture, wallpaper and stained glass. Even in the buildings, the buildings were more in relationship with the traditional architecture of England. So if this was traditional, this is what arts and crafts would be, or this was traditional, then this is arts and crafts. So you find a lot of similarity, and arts and crafts movement spread under many titles throughout Europe, and we will talk about that in detail. Now the other theory that came up was by Henry Cole, who said ornament must be secondary to the thing ornamented. This was another way of fitness in the ornament, fitness in the ornament. When William Morris said fitness for purpose, Henry Cole said ornament must be secondary to the thing ornamented. That means the product itself defines what kind of, or the occasion defines, or the function defines what kind of ornamentation should be there. Now these are vital concepts laying the foundation of modern buildings. Now again, let us come to ornamentation, and again I will give you a glimpse of our day-to-day life to give you an idea. You wear, for example, heavy ornaments, heavy jewelry for a marriage. You wear a certain light kind of jewelry when you are in a corporate job. You wear a certain kind of jewelry when it has to be a vacation, casual wear, and you wear a certain kind of jewelry when you go to a party. So whether it's a traditional function, it's in a job, it's in a casual vacation, or it's in a party, the kind of ornamentation is fit for the occasion. If you just for a moment try to visualize heavy traditional wear in a corporate job, how will it look like? It will completely seem out of place, and that is why they were speaking about it. Certain kind of ornamentation was completely out of place in the buildings of the time or the products of the time, and therefore William Morris talked about fitness for purpose and Henry Cole talked about fitness in ornament. Then Augustus Pugin in his True Principles said there are two great rules of design. All these theories, I talked about a certain set of theories in the 18th century discussion, talking about certain theories today, they are intrinsic to what modern architecture is today. Auguste Pugin said two great rules of design: no feature about a building not necessary for convenience, construction or correctness. All ornament must enrich the essential construction of the building, not take away from it. He came up with these structures which are very plain, unornamented and very simple, though in his Gothic revivalist project, the neo Gothic project, when he designed the interiors, for example, of the House of Parliament, we don't find that these theories about ornamentation, are they really true? Is this ornamentation that Pugin himself incorporated in the House of Parliament, is it leading to the enrichment of the existing structure or not? I leave the question to you. But the impact of these theories was definitely felt in modern architecture in the 20th century, where buildings changed profoundly. Whether it was the monastery La Tourette by Le Corbusier, an exposed RCC, the brutalist architecture, we will talk about it. Whether it was the functionist organization of building as different components coming together as in the Bauhaus, whether it was the glass and steel architecture of Mies van der Rohe or the organic fantastic house Falling Water by Frank Lloyd Wright. Now ornamentation in architecture did continue. We find ornamentation, for example, in the works of Louis Sullivan in the Chicago School. We find ornamentation changing the way it is shown, in the way the building is composed. There is a certain aesthetic in it, or if you look at the Heather Aliyev Center, the ornamentation is more in the way the building is put together, the flow of the form. That has now become the major aesthetic of the building. There is no attached ornamentation, there is no added ornamentation, but the building itself has this homogeneous, that aesthetic within it. Now similarly, just as the art and craft, the next thing that followed was the Art Nouveau, which was a reaction against the eclecticism and historicism of the 19th century. It was inspired by natural forms, just as I talked about in the arts and crafts movement, with whiplash lines and the use of modern materials. We will look at whiplash lines later. Now, so we moved from the arts and crafts movement to the Art Nouveau. It was the first major shift in architecture from historical styles. Whether it was the development in the 18th or the 19th century, one thing we see consistently, architects looking back in history for their solutions. But for the first time, architects decided to discard from historical influence completely, not look at historical styles. But if you don't look at historical styles, what can be your next source of inspiration? That turned out to be nature. And thus Art Nouveau, inspired by nature, started appearing in graphics, in sculptures and in paintings. Art Nouveau objects displayed that natural form ornamentation in whether it was table lamps or hanging lamps or other forms of other objects, and it appeared in architecture, and we will talk more about it more closely in the later buildings. The derivation of the name Art Nouveau came from a shop in Paris called Maison de l'Art Nouveau, which showcased objects having the Art Nouveau design approach. It came to be known by different names throughout Europe: Art Nouveau in France, Style Guimard in Paris, or Style Liberty Style Guimard in France, Style Liberty in Italy, Modernismo in Spain, etc. Came under different names, but it was a movement spread throughout Europe and Britain and even impacting America. Now there were visual similarities with Baroque. That was, there was profuse color in both Baroque and in Art Nouveau. There was ornamentation in Baroque, in Art Nouveau, and but the inspirations were different. If in Baroque, again I will repeat, the inspiration was religion, Art Nouveau, the inspiration was nature. Again in Art Nouveau, it was characterized by these whiplash lines in biomorphic forms. That means forms derived from biology, from the plant and plant life, and zoomorphic, that is derived from animal life. So you have this example very close. This is a piece designed by Antoni Gaudí in one of his buildings, and this is a direct representation with mosaic broken tiles of a chameleon. And you find these whiplash lines here in Victor Horta's Tassel house. You find this kind of whiplash and vegetal ornamentation in this building. So this started appearing in Art Nouveau. Now another thing that we find the biomorphic and zoomorphic forms later on impacting in a different way in the 20th century is biomimicry. Hopefully we will talk more about it in detail later, but just to give you a glimpse of it, biomimicry is the imitation of nature for solving human problems. Biomimicry is not only in architecture, it is also there in other forms of technology. For example, the helicopter is a derivation of an insect and of a fly, and there are many others. A plane, very simple example, is a derivation of a bird in flight. So here, for example, in architecture, the bird's nest, a stadium designed for the Beijing Olympics by Herzog and Guimard, is a direct derivation of the simple way in which a bird puts together its nest using twigs, etc. Now this is one example of biomimicry. Or we have the Swissri, the gherkin, which is an example borrowed from a sea creature called the gherkin. Or biomimicry not in form or in appearance, but in form in the very technology that is being used in it. For example, the Eastgate Center in Harare in Zimbabwe in 1996, the air conditioning system in the building has been derived from the kind of air conditioning mechanism that ants or termites use in a termite hill there. The later form of Art Nouveau was mechanomorphic, not just biomorphic or zoomorphic, but derived from machines or mechanomorphic, and this was the final stage of Art Nouveau, where the buildings started appearing as the buildings of the modern times would be. For example, here we see in the Postal Saving Bank or the Maison du Peuple. The movement itself lasted a very short time of only 20 years, and the impact was it impacted very strongly the forms of the modern era and led architects to evolve new concepts. So these buildings, for example, the plain and simple box-like geometry of the Perkersdorf Sanatorium by Hoffmann, or the interior of the Postal Savings Bank by Otto Wagner with exposed steel columns and with the rivets also exposed in them, was all to appear in the modern times. The first Art Nouveau houses and interiors were designed in Brussels in the 1890s, houses by Paul Anka, Henry van der Welt and Victor Horta, especially the 1893 Tassel house by Victor Horta. This particular house was a biomorphic representation. In this house, what we find first of all is that the plan became very prominent. As you enter the house, you enter a large space which is double height. There is a mezzanine created within the house, and then it leads to the second floor. The mezzanine, and the reason why he provided that was because there were these row housing, and therefore there was no way of getting light from the sides. The only way to get light was from the front or behind or from the top, and he tried to maximize that by providing a double height space here and providing this oriel window, this projecting out like a semicircle oriel window here, and thus trying to capture maximum light from the front facade, that is from here, and pushing that light into this double height space here, and then also borrowing light from the top. As you find here, the skylights there right in the center of the house in this model that you see, he is pulling in light from the top. Natural light is flooding the interior through the light wells. The ornamentation itself was these plant-like forms with these whiplash lines. Now, what are whiplash lines? Whiplash lines are the line that would be created by a whip when you use it, and these lines then started appearing in decoration, in the floors, in the walls, etc. They are like vegetal, like plants would have it. So that appeared even in the stained glass that was used over the sky in the skylight. It started appearing there. So if we try to compare Baroque with Art Nouveau, we find the ornamentation has changed dramatically, derived from religion, profuse ornamentation. Here also there is lot of ornamentation, but it is derived from nature. These are some of the interiors of Victor Horta. And then there is the work of Hector Guimard in the Paris metro stations in 1900, which had these very sensuous forms. They are like the stalk-like antennae of an insect coming out here in the Paris metros, or some are covered, some are completely exposed. These stalk-like structures working as the supports in the Paris metros. Now, this heritage of these metro stations continues to be preserved in Paris even till today, and they are still functional. Now, the metro stations since 1890 have evolved from Guimard's work, and there is a lot of similarity between what Guimard had come up with and what is being generated today in modern architecture, with much more aesthetic is different, but the same concept is being used. Now, the metro stations themselves have become very important urban architectural forms. There are these repetitive panels and structural supports which are merged with the form, and these are the various kind of metro station entrances that have come across Europe. So, we see this change happening with the arts and crafts and the Art Nouveau movement, and we will go ahead and see more of it in the next presentation. When we talk about other works of the Art Nouveau period, we will particularly focus on the works of Antoni Gaudí, the architect of probably the most well-known architect to come out of the Art Nouveau movement, and the remarkable work that he did. And we will also look at the works later of C.R. Mackintosh and how that led to the rise of modernism. Thank you.